Thank you, Stella. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Lawrence, and thanks for coming out again. All right. So let me just kick off by introducing a little bit about myself. I'm Lawrence, and I've been working overseas for most of my life. And I was previously with Sony Electronics, and they posted me to faraway places like Dubai, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and even India. And throughout these places, I've held all sorts of positions in sales, in marketing, in product marketing, and then later in management, in leadership. So across that time, I was able to learn much about communication, the importance of it, and what it takes to communicate with various stakeholders. You may have the best intentions, but sometimes if you do not communicate properly, things just fall apart. Another thing that you might want to know a little bit about me is that, which maybe my family members find a bit difficult, is that I'm extremely comfortable in chaotic situations. I've always been put into very difficult situations in order to resolve them and try to communicate with the various stakeholders. I'm able to explain very complex policies, programs, difficult situations in very simple terms sometimes. Sometimes I find that maybe even within our government, sometimes I listen to Parliament, and simple things can actually become quite complicated. So many people have asked me, so if you're doing so well in an MNC life, why did you leave? I think that after a while, by the time I hit about 38, 39, I discovered that it is going to be very difficult for me to be able to proceed further in my career. And at that point in time, I was based out of Hong Kong, and therefore I was extremely close to the very industrialized city of Shenzhen. I found that place to be brimming with creativity. There wasn't a lot of government policy. The provincial government of Shenzhen takes a very hands-off approach, especially when it comes to creativity, and it doesn't stifle with bureaucracy. However, China is a place with a minimum wage, and it took me a while for me to understand, because I started a manufacturing facilities there to make very high-end, high-tech surveillance and video conferencing cameras. So it took a while for my managers to be able to explain to me, and I had various conversations with the local government regarding why do you have a minimum wage? Isn't that making things difficult for investors like myself? However, the Chinese government was able to explain two things to me, and they said it to me in no uncertain terms, and I appreciate it up till today. That, number one, with the existence of a minimum wage, the local workforce would be protected from very demanding, very difficult, and often, extremely often, unscrupulous employers. Their lives are not easy. I appreciate what my people do, but seriously, without a minimum wage there, why would I have to pay them even more? And that minimum wage increases every single year. But truth be told, I've started the factory since 2008. It is still functioning today, and we are still paying more than 150, 200 people, depending on the situation, that very important minimum wage. The second reason for that minimum wage is to keep up with inflation. I think everybody knows that for quite a long period of time, about 15 years, China was experiencing something like 8-9% of growth per annum, year on year. But what a lot of people do not really report, but because of the minimum wage, they are buffered, that the inflation was also going up at an increasingly high rate as well. So the minimum wage serves to protect the local workforce. My staff enjoys their minimum wage because it is mandated by law. All across China, in all 30 over provinces, they have that minimum wage. And actually very few people know this. Shenzhen has the highest one, the highest minimum wage. So I think all this sounds a little bit familiar. I think that the cost of living in Singapore over the last, well, I look at the statistics, I think especially since 2018, just prior to COVID, the Singapore government has been growing at an alarming rate. And sometimes I feel that that growth policy, although I support that growth policy, has not allowed social policies to keep up as well. Singapore, we do not have that minimum wage. And I think that it is time that we hold our Prime Minister, Lawrence Wong, and he said on May 14, one day before he took over as Prime Minister, that he will look at all policies with his 4G leaders, and if necessary, he will slay sacred cows. You ask yourself, if Singapore doesn't have a minimum wage, so what do we have? We have what we call a PWM. We have a progressive wage model. Now that was enacted about 13 years ago by now. 13 years? All right. As the head of the Manufacturing Federation, I speak about it quite often. But if you Google it, you will understand that that was 12, 13 years ago. I think that at that point in time, our policymaker had the macroeconomic situation, the environment to enact that. I think that's fine. However, ever since 2018, there has been breakneck speed of technological advancement. Wherever you go right now, you go into a coffee bean and tea leaf and you will find a robot returning trays. You will find everywhere that they are cleaning robots and security cameras, they are capable of 4K. So therefore, I'm telling you right now that productivity is not the most important thing. We have to keep up. I think that we have to look at the feasibility of a minimum wage. People ask me, close friends, my family, my daughter who is here tonight, why do this? Why run? I find that Singapore is at a critical juncture. I find that we could be possibly veering off course. The Singapore government will always tell you that they will adjust themselves, that they will check themselves, they will, I don't like to say it, but they say it, it's known as own self, check own self. I think that in any large organization, any management guru, they will tell you, that's not possible. Because there is no consequence of not doing it. What is the consequence of not changing? As long as they are dominant, as long as there is a dominant number of seats in Parliament, it is extremely difficult for a large organization like our government. And we have a large government, all right? Okay? Our civil service is excellent, but great doesn't mean immune. I've been in those meetings, I've sat in those meetings, and it is the very personification of an echo chamber. In closing, what I stand for job creation and sustainable growth, not one-stop growth. I feel that in Singapore, the unheard voice of the people is give me a job, not vouchers. Not just vouchers. Give me your vote tonight and elect me into Parliament, and I will speak to the ministries on your behalf. I speak their language. Vote for the PSP. Vote for Tan Cheng Bock. And here in Marymount SMC, let's vote for Jeffrey Khoo. Thank you very much.